All right, good morning. It's my pleasure to welcome Eric Rhinehart to our conversation today. And Eric, thank you so much for joining us. And he's joining us from beautiful sunny California. Of course, I'm here in Nashville where it's like, 35 degrees. So I'm envious, Eric.
Well, thank you for having me. Yeah, it's sunny San Diego, about 70 here, so I'm not complaining.
Beautiful, beautiful. Well, I was introduced to Eric through my friends at the Meadows, and it really was kind of an interesting introduction because just like hey, you've got to meet Eric. We'd love to have you interview him and explain the role of interventionist in regards to an admissions team, and it really resonated with me, Eric, because from my days at foundations, we had great relationships with interventionists. And you and I were just catching up on, one of our dear old friends who's passed away a few years ago, John Southworth, was such a mentor, to me. And of course, even mentioning, some of the old cast of characters like Ken Seeley, and his partner, Eric McLaughlin. I love hearing some of those names being brought back up. And I think there's such an interesting bond that can happen between an admissions team and a really quality group of interventionists.
I absolutely agree. I had the pleasure to meet all of those guys and work with them and train with them as well. Learned so much knowledge from each and every one of them. We all have our own kind of individual approach, if you would, but being able to take things from each one and then also parlay it into my own style has been such a great pleasure for me.
For a lot of people who are new into this world, Eric, they may not understand that for interventionists, it's not like you just read Judith Landau's book, or you just meet somebody. Like, there's a lot of professional training and really mentorship that goes into being an interventionist these days.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. One of the things that I really get frustrated with is some people say, "Oh, I'm an interventionist," and they took a weekend class. Like, no, that's not an interventionist. An online class or what have you. And then I come across a family they've done an intervention on, and they've done more harm than good.
Mm.
Because they didn't know how to wrap things up and to help the family when they were in that crisis. So the intervention trainings I took, I mean, were years. It wasn't, a weekend thing. It was many different modules, many different hours of supervision, many different hours of training and shadowing, things like that. Very similar to my background in marriage family therapy, because I'm a licensed marriage family therapist and also a LADAC. So, you get those hours and all those different fields of your expertise. And it's really important that you get the proper training because, there's an oath, do no harm. And that's what I live and die by.
Well, and I think that's so critical because really, what I try to train and try to encourage a missions team are that there's going to be a certain number of inquiries or families that are calling in that really need to be connected to an interventionist, because there's only so far that we can take that caller, that caller's family. And you get to a certain point where it may make sense for them to connect with somebody like you, and especially somebody is highly qualified, because you can get even deeper into the whole family unit component and really then help to intervene successfully and then bring that person back into treatment. I wonder if you might kind of talk about how sometimes that happens between an admission center when they first reach out to you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it is important for the admissions teams to be the first voice that they hear, right? From my time at Betty Ford Center, I was also in the admissions department. And, I was taking all these different calls. It was like triage. These families are in crisis. They don't know where to turn to. Their loved one is struggling, they're scared, and they don't know what to do. So they reach out, and that first voice that they hear on the phone is so important to give them that compassion, that empathy that they need during that desperate time, and being able to talk them through options and then talk to them about, have you tried or thought about considering an intervention? This is what it looks like. This is an idea that could work for you and your family if you'd like to check it out. And here's information about an interventionist or an intervention. I would encourage you to talk to this person, give them that number, and then reach out, because once they call me, I can talk to them about the process more in detail and kind of go over exactly what it entails. Because when I do interventions, I involve the whole family system. When I tell them this intervention isn't just about your loved one, it's about all of you, right? When we do interventions, I talk to them about how your loved one has been hijacked by their addiction, and you all have been hijacked by what's happening because of their addiction. Now it's time for everyone to get to a place of healing and recovery, not just the individual, but also the family system, because it's a family disease and we know there's ripple effects. So being able to work with the whole family system is so important. And I think admissions, do a great job with filtering those calls. And I think it is important sometimes just knowing that, an interventionist can give more details about what that process looks like, and handing that over to the interventionist is definitely key to success for that family getting treatment.
I think one of the things, Eric, too, that I like to always, remind the admissions counselors that I work with and coach is that when they get ready to make a referral to an interventionist, the interventionist is going to be doing a lot of work remotely, but they're really going to be digging in. There's no guarantee, and there should be no quid pro quo, that when you get there and you see on the ground what's going on, you're learning more about the history of the struggle. That patient may not come directly to that center. You may make a decision with the family that another center is more appropriate. And that is the ethical way to approach it. I have heard stories of people that, well, I don't want to go with that interventionist because they might not bring them back to me. And I just like to always train people that, listen, you are entrusting this partner in the interventionist that they're going to make the right decision, not based on the business aspect of where the dollars are going, but what's right for that family and that family member. And so I don't know if you can speak to that, but I think it's so important that you guys have the leeway with the family to make the right call on the ground.
Oh yeah, no, that's a great point, Lee. I appreciate you bringing that up. When I get the call often, and let's say they were referred by the Meadows to me, and I talk to the family, and they ask me, do you think the Meadows is the best fit for our loved one? And then we go over everything. And I always go over, I have 3 criteria: clinical appropriateness, financial appropriateness, geographical appropriateness, right? Now, what I do is I talk to the family about what their loved one is really struggling from. What are the underlying conditions? Okay. If there's trauma there, there's no better place, in my opinion, than the Meadows for trauma. I think they do such a great job with trauma, the mental health and addiction, the whole trifecta. So if the family's struggling with trauma, addiction, and mental health, absolutely Meadows. Now, if there's not trauma and other things are going on, that it seems like another treatment center might be more of a fit for that family, then I'm absolutely going to talk to them about that. Let's say someone that's in the state of psychosis, right? The Meadows, they can't really, accurately treat someone in active psychosis because it's not appropriate. That person can engage and participate in treatment. So we'd want to be able to take that person to another level of care, whether that's like the manager clinic or something of that nature, to be able to be stabilized. And then possibly, if the family wants to, maybe transfer to the Meadows if they want to go with the Meadows later on down the road. If not, then they get the treatment at the manager clinic, and that's okay. So it's really important to get people to the right level of care. I think, especially with like eating disorders, those are one that I get often. If someone has a extreme low level of BMI, then obviously the Meadows may not be the right fit at that time. So that person may have to go to a place like Denver Acute to stabilize and to get to where they need to be. And if the family wants to transfer to the Meadows, then that's an option. If not, they stay at Denver Acute, or we explore other options. To me, the most important thing is to get people the treatment they need, right? That's what I'm here for, to get the loved one into treatment so they can successfully learn to heal and recover, and that family system can have a sense of solace.
Yeah, I appreciate you, sharing that perspective too, because it's one that it's like I told you before the call, this morning, and in fact, I'm repping them. I was at Cumberland Heights all morning, and it's never a competitive thing between from the different programs that I work with. It's because we all have these specialties, these things that come up that it's all about what's best for that patient and their family. And believe me, the addiction crisis in this country just continues to grow. There's no shortage of potential patients and clients for all of our programs. It's really the best opportunity in working with people like you that are going to bring the right type of patient and client to each of the programs that's going to be the best fit for the most success. And that's why I think it's so critical, because there's probably other centers that are referring to you that are like-minded, like the clients I work with, that also they may send you somebody, but maybe you then do choose the Meadows for them, or Cumberland Heights, or Sabino or Breathe or what have you. And it's that kind of, I think, connection where we're focused on what's right for the patient. And we really train our admissions team to do the same thing, because even when people think about conversion rates, let's say you were just knocking it out of the park and you had a 10% conversion rate. Well, where are you sending those other 90 people?
Absolutely.
And I
Yes.
imagine it's very similar to intervention, because not every referral or call you get means a successful intervention, does it?
No, it does not. I wish I could say it does, but it doesn't. There are times, where the call I get, it doesn't come to fruition for some reason or another. You bring up a good point. I get calls from other centers, as well. And one in particular, I won't name the center, but I got a call from them not too long ago about a family in need, and that family was struggling with more mental health and trauma. And so, actually, in this case, I did refer that patient to the Meadows
Mm-hmm.
for the reason of the mental health and trauma, because the trauma workshop that the Meadows offers is above and beyond anything that I've seen in the country, in my opinion. And this place only did chemical dependency, really, and they did really well with chemical dependency and addiction, but they couldn't treat the trauma. And I told the family, I said, look, I know they referred you to me, and I will talk with them about this as well. But right now, my goal is for your loved one to really address the underlying causes and concerns that keeps them drinking and using to numb out that pain. And it's not going to resolve itself unless we get to that root cause. And that was the trauma. And, this person went to the Meadows.
Eric, can you talk just a little bit about, there are a lot of different models. I mean, there's, going back, to, some of the original, the Johnson models, there's, the Arise, the Invitational, Love First. I mean, can you talk about, have all the models now kind of blended in? Is everything or are there still, very, I'd love to know kind of where is the intervention space today, and how should we in the admission center, when we're kind of teeing it up, like, what should we focus on? Should we focus on, no, this guy's Johnson or this guy's Breathe, or what have you?
There are so many models, as you're mentioning, and I feel like with the Arise model, let's say, I'm a licensed marriage family therapist. I did a couple of Arise trainings just to kind of go see what it was about, and it was things I learned in my graduate program.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I really didn't feel like took anything from it as much. I utilized the Johnson model more than any, just because I've had more success with that. And I feel like that element of surprise is so good, you know? And then I use the invitational approach as well at times. And I will always offer the family the option. I'll say, hey, let's talk about the models here. How do you feel that your loved one will show up if we do an invitational approach to a family meeting? Do you feel like they're going to show up? And I would say 9 times out of 10, Lee, they say no. They're going to plan how to not show up. They're going to leave. They're going to do whatever they can to avoid. And that makes sense to me, because what has that person been doing for ever how long they've been using? They've been disengaging, avoiding, and using, because it's hard to face whatever it is they're struggling with. That's why they numb it out with the addiction and the substances and the alcohol or what have you. So I do give them the option, however, most of the time I use the Johnson model. And then I use systemic based practices as well from my marriage family therapy background. So I always involve the whole family system. And I like to get friends involved. I think friends that are involved are a game changer. And the reason I say that is because there's a different relationship dynamic between the family and the friends. When you get friends involved, oftentimes that person is struggling, they won't be as angry and attack that friend like they do their family. right? They have some kind of, you know, difficulty with family members, and we don't know exactly what that history was like sometimes. So if I can get friends to be involved, either Zoom or in person, it's so impactful and helpful. So those would be the approaches that I use mostly. I would say Johnson, probably 9 times out of 10. But I always offer the invitational approach, especially with someone with trauma. If someone has extensive trauma, I offer the invitational approach. I'm currently doing an intervention now who has lots of trauma. I offer the mom, the invitational approach. And the first thing she said to me is, absolutely not. She won't show up. I said, matter of fact, once she hears that we have a family meeting, she's going to be gone. And I'm worried, So I said, okay, I just want to make sure that we explore that option. So at this point, it sounds like we're going to do the surprise model. And she said, yes, I think that's the best way to do it. I said, okay, great. Because I want to empower the family to be part of that decision-making process, right?
Mm-hmm.
Part of interventions, and this is what I tell the families, we're learning to be comfortable being uncomfortable. That's what everyone is learning during their intervention process, right? Not just the individual, because we're going to ask them to take accountability that day for their addiction and whatever they're struggling with. But we're also asking the family members to be accountable, because I can tell you there's been so many times when I do an intervention, I've done interventions on more than one person in an intervention because I find out more things that are happening in that family system. The most I got in treatment at one time was 4. And it was because I found out, other people were using. And I always tell them, guys, I need to know these things because I can't look like a deer in the headlights. If I look like a deer in the headlights, we're going to lose your loved one. I need to know this, and it's okay. There's no judgment, there's no blaming, there's no shaming. We need to know because that person is going to tell me, well, so and so drinks with me, or so and so does this. How are they trying to tell me I need treatment when they're doing these things, right? So it's really important to have that transparency in that pre-intervention planning meeting that I do. And that is the meat and potatoes of an intervention, the pre-planning meeting.
How long from the moment that you get a referral to contact a family, do you have kind of is it a few days, a week, or is it just highly dependent on the situation before you would have enough information, enough family detail to actually show up to do the intervention itself?
So, each case is different because, I mean, when you get a call about intervention, let's just face it, I don't get calls when things are good. I mean, things are not good, right? So when I get a call, I know how urgent these matters are. So I try to respond as promptly as I can. Um, you know, Most of the time I respond within 24 hours, if not sooner, because I know every minute that that person's using is a chance that they could overdose, right? Or something could happen. And I want to make sure we avoid that as much as we can. Okay. So I would say when I get a call and I first reach out to the family and talk to them, usually it's about 2 to 3 days in between before we do the pre intervention meeting. And then sometimes, depends on the pre intervention is in person or if it's on Zoom. If it's in person, we do the intervention the next day. If it's on Zoom, there may be a few days in between. And it also really depends on how many people are going to be involved in the intervention because people are in different geographical locations. So let's say there's someone that I feel is instrumental to the intervention and they can't be there for 3, 4 days to a week. I tell the family, guys, I know we don't want to wait, but if you're telling me this person is probably the most instrumental relationship that they have, I think it's so important that they be there. So, we're going to wait it out if we have to. So it's always kind of a strategic plan, if you would.
Immediately after the intervention, then you're escorting the patient to the center, correct?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Um, you know, that is something that I absolutely do because when you do an intervention, it's such a cathartic process. And there's a lot of things that have come up in that process. That person is more likely to relapse, no, sorry, not relapse, to overdose and do things that could be really harmful for them. So you absolutely have to escort them to make sure you provide that supervision, often on a plane, if you would, and because when they're struggling with alcohol and drugs, they may do something that could put themselves in harm's way or others, and then also may act, erratically in some way and get in lots of trouble. So 100% you have to escort that person to treatment and make sure they're safely and secure, at the treatment place.
And then maybe for our audience too, I mean, once you've dropped them off the facility, I mean, you're staying in touch with the family even post discharge, right?
Absolutely. So when I do my intervention process, I tell the families, I'm here to coach and guide you along the way. So while that person's in treatment, I will coordinate with you in the treatment center as long as there's a release of information on file. If there's not, if the person is angry with me because of the intervention, which sometimes that happens, it does happen, because I'm uprooting them from their place of comfort at their time. So most of the time, though, I do get releases because on that plane flight, let's say, I'm getting to build more connection with that person. I'm getting to more deep rooted issues that's happening with them. I'm learning from their perspective on what's been going on in their life and their family's life. So in that plane flight, I can be doing, I don't want to call it therapy, but I'm doing a deep dive into what the cause was and why they were using in the first place. Right. And then I asked them, I would love to stay connected with you. If you would just sign this release for me, that would be great. So I could have communication, with yourself and your family. And then the family, because the intervention isn't just about getting the person to treatment. The intervention is about helping that person achieve long lasting, sustainable recovery. Okay. So the intervention and getting them to treatment, yes, that's the first step. But the end goal is for them to stay in recovery. So what I do is I talk to the family about learning how to adhere to their boundaries and consequences and things. Now, the family members sometimes will get a call from their loved one. Hey, I want to leave treatment earlier. I want to do these things, or so and so. I don't like this therapist. I tell them, guys, trust me on this. Stick to what we talked about, right? And so I always tell them, call me before you respond. Okay, call me before you respond to them, or email me, or whatever it may be, because I want to make sure when we do this, this is the only time we do this. That person goes to treatment, and we know people relapse, right? It's just the way it is. It's part of the stages of change. However, interventions are more successful when the whole family system is involved and everyone is doing their own self-care and their own recovery. During that intervention process, I always talk to them about what are they going to do for themselves as well in regards to their recovery plan, whether that's going to, Al-Anon or CODA, right? Or doing some other self-care, step meetings, doing their own individual therapy or family therapy or whatever it may entail, right? That's important because when that person leaves treatment and they come back in that family system, we need everyone to have made changes. So
Well, and I think it's really fascinating because we do a training on what happens when the family calls back after their loved one's been in treatment for a week and they're hearing all these complaints, and it's always the food's terrible, the bed's lumpy, people are mean, and it's kind of like, yeah, that's why it's really helpful to have an interventionist in your corner too, because we've all heard these stories, but if you're new, and you're that loving family, we're hearing this, like you're like not prepared. It's like it's very helpful to have not only the admissions team kind of prepping them that this could happen. You could start hearing these unfounded complaints because they're not happy to be there. But boy, it's so nice to have people like you that also are so experienced that can also walk that family through. This is normal. This is what happens when people sometimes go to treatment. They may not, they want to all of a sudden leave.
yeah, no, absolutely. And I've gotten so many, excuses about wanting to leave treatment. There was a hair on my pillow, or the food didn't taste good, or they woke me up too early. I'm like, guys, you're going to treatment, not vacation. Why, take the hair off your pillow, ask for
Yeah.
another one, you know. Yeah, but that's the thing, you're getting someone to go into a place that's more structured and develop a new routine in
Mm.
their life, right? That's the important piece of it. They're developing a new routine and new healthy coping skills and habits to be able to promote that long-term sustainable recovery.
Well, Eric, I really appreciate your time today. I think this is going to be very exciting for admissions teams to be able to hear directly from an interventionist like yourself. And is there, I don't know, do you have like a website, or how can people get in touch with you if they'd like to learn a little bit more about your work?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Thank you. And Lee, it's been my pleasure as well. I want to first say, the Meadows admissions team are some of the best that I've worked with in the country. I do want to say that. You can tell they really care, and they really take the time to listen to what the families are saying. And myself, who worked in admissions in the Betty Ford Center, prior to doing interventions, as I said, we're that first voice of reason, for that family to tell their story to. And so having that compassion, that empathy about what's happening with that person is so important. So, I just wanted to say that because I think they do a great job. My website is ER Interventions and Therapy Services, and that iserinterventions.com. So I wish I could say I came up with that play on words. My wife did, because my name is Eric Rhinehart in emergency room. So it's kind of cool, and I got the
And
Red, White, and Blue.
I'll put the link in the lesson plan too, so people can just
Appreciate
click
that.
on it and go there too. Yeah.
Love that. But yeah, I think, the Meadows is a great facility, and they provide, in my opinion, the best care in the country for trauma, mental health, and addiction.
Well, that's great feedback, and I'm sure Sean and her team, there in Wickenburg, will love to hear that. We have a saying that a lot of times when I'm brought in to coach, admissions teams, one of the first things that I'll hear when I start listening to phone calls, and I've listened to over 10,000 phone calls in my career, is that we a lot of times people want to the agent wants to do a lot of talking, and I always tell them, listen, if you're talking, you're selling. If you're listening, you're caring. And I think, I think connecting with people like yourself that really get that and have experienced that, especially at such a great program with the history of Betty Ford. I mean, I think that's so important for people that are new coming into an admissions role to be able to hear that sometimes we think we're supposed to be talking. It's like, no, we're supposed to be listening. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I agree. It's all about listening and, being that ear for that person. I
yep.
100% agree. Definitely.
Eric, thank you so much. I look forward to seeing you out there on the road.